Welcome to Airplane Mode, a new Tailosive Tech-based web series living right here on the Tailosive Tech channel. And no, we're not gonna stop talking about Apple products, don't you worry. I recommend watching some of my special documentary-style videos in the past if you're wondering why we're talking about airplanes all of a sudden, but a lot of it stems down to, there's not a lot of excitement. There's not a lot of innovation going on in the smartphone or tablet or laptop space anymore. It's a lot of iteration upon iteration. And I'm still happy to talk about all of the minute little details in new generation iPhones and Apple products, but I also want to use this channel to highlight some things that are very exciting and interesting to me. And one technology that I think is on the cusp of being revolutionized and is on its way to shake up the industry as we know it is aviation. Similar to the iPhone space, whenever you go to an airport, you notice that basically all the aircraft have kind of morphed into the same basic shapes. They're all slight iterations on that classic, Boeing 737 design. Got a couple engines on the wings, you got a long fuselage, and we've all just kind of accepted that aircraft are going to be subsonic, even though there were times in the past where we had supersonic aircraft. They failed for many reasons that we can dive into with future videos, but that was a long time ago, and there's certainly been a lot of advancements in technology, whether it be computers, cameras, software, that have unlocked all kinds of new capabilities, particularly with electric vehicles. More and more these days becoming computers on wheels that are more fun to drive, that can be fast, and there's a lot we've learned from recharging them and figuring out how they age and how to maintain them best. And I have a whole channel dedicated for just talking about revolutions in the EV space, but since this channel was getting more and more lonely with smaller and smaller tech updates, I wanted to highlight in today's video that there's a new upcoming startup that is actually looking to revolutionize this bean counting industry that the airline game has become. We've just kind of accepted the status quo. This is the most efficient, most cost-effective way to build airplanes. And while AI and robotics certainly gets a lot of hype these days, every time they figure out how to make a robot pick up a backpack or an egg, and they just keep insisting that, oh, software will make these robots do amazing things down the line. We can talk about that. I'm not against it, but I don't think this industry is getting highlighted enough, because what I'm more interested in when it comes to technology is not just slightly faster export times or slightly better pictures compared to last generation phone cameras. I want to talk about technology that unlocks experiences that were never possible before, that unlock new ways of tourism, new ways of working, new ways of bringing friends and family together. And maybe it's a little bit of biased on my end because I've spent a lot of time in aircraft over the past year, a lot of which flying overseas and visiting family members in different places that I really want more people to get to experience, including friends and family in my social circles. And I know so many of them are just incapable or uninterested in spending, 10 to 12 or 15 hours on a flight, which makes a lot of trips and a lot of destinations just unreachable for a lot of people out there. But there's a new exciting startup working on a product you can see behind me here called Boom Supersonic, and they're working on revolutionizing and innovating aircraft design so that we can bring back supersonic airline transport and make it economical. There's a lot of companies that have tried to do this. It's certainly not easy, but the reason I wanted to highlight Boom is they seem to be, at least from what I can tell, further along than any other startup in this space. They've already built a miniaturized version of their Overture aircraft and broke the sound barrier with it, and on top of that, found a way to break the sound barrier without actually causing an audible sonic boom that can be heard from the ground. This is one of the big issues people had with supersonic aircraft back in the day. They were just too dang loud. They caused these loud booms that could kind of startle people from the ground. They didn't want to hear that anymore, so they passed all kinds of legislation preventing supersonic air travel from being legal on land. But Boom's CEO has been hard at work at legalizing supersonic aircraft as long as they don't break a certain decibel limit from the ground, so that hopefully one day we can cut all air travel time by about a half. And sure, there's many challenges with coming up with an aircraft that can efficiently and reliably go this fast and also make it economical, of course. That's another big challenge that supersonic aircraft in the past, like the Concorde, faced. But there's a lot of new innovative technologies that are now available with the Boom Overture aircraft, that's what they're calling this one, that were not previously available back in the Concorde days. For example, similar to the Boeing 787, which I've most recently flown on my way back from Australia, the fuselage is mostly carbon fiber, a much lighter material that we can make at higher volume scale now. Wasn't really an option for aviation material back in the Concorde days, but this is lighter than aluminum, lighter than steel, but still very structural, and we know it's aviation grade because there are many aircraft now purely made of carbon fiber by Boeing, and while Boeing has certainly had some issues with some of their aircraft, the 787s at least appear to be somewhat reliable and pretty efficient because of their low weight. Couple this with having 4 fairly powerful engines instead of the 2 you find on a 787, and a much more aerodynamic streamlined shape with more of a delta wing, you know, more triangular, which is of course more optimized for supersonic flight, and already there's a lot of efficiency gains to be had by this updated platform. The Concorde also had a lot of complications where the cockpit had to physically rotate so that the pilots could see the runway as they were coming in for landing. The snoot would droop, as people called it. But in today's day and age, we have very reliable and redundant camera systems that allow the pilots to see very, very well beneath the aircraft without actually having to pivot the cockpit. And Blake, their CEO, has talked about how they've positioned the cameras to be wider apart underneath the cockpit than a bird's wingspan so that it would be very difficult to lose both cameras simultaneously. A lot of people might be skeptical of like, oh, I don't know about relying on vision purely based on cameras or wires, but so much of aircraft is fly-by-wire these days. There's not a lot of mechanical linkages anymore between the cockpit and the wing anyway. So essentially, an aircraft, they have to have very reliable wiring and electronics to function in the first place. So just being able to see underneath the aircraft through cameras is really actually not that big of a stretch. We've gotten pretty reliable at it, and they seem confident that they can make it safe and easy and reliable to land this aircraft without such a heavy, expensive, complicated apparatus like we had on the front of the Concorde to literally, you know, morph the shape of the fuselage. And the big key to the equation, making aircraft engines that are efficient enough to cruise at supersonic speed, but also not waste too much fuel on takeoff and landing. So Boom has actually taken it upon themselves to develop their own engines internally, and they've already had some of the first components show up for their first full-scale Overture build, now that they've already tested and calibrated a lot of what they're designing for in the field with their miniaturized XB-1 aircraft, which broke the sound barrier multiple times. I'm getting excited because essentially they're entering a new stage now where they're going to build a full-scale version of the Overture aircraft that's actually going to be able to hold dozens of people and, of course, break the sound barrier without having a super audible boom from the ground. This means flights across the country could just take a couple of hours in the future, and going to Sydney, Australia might eventually feel like flying to Hawaii from SF. And I think this unlocks all kinds of different possibilities for workforces, you know, where people can go on a business trip, save a lot more time, and also where people can travel for tourism, experience more places than they've experienced before because they won't have to sit on an aircraft for over half a day. Now, there's a lot of financial challenges and aerodynamic challenges that Boom is facing to make this a reality, but I'm excited to learn more. I'm rooting for them, and I hope you guys can get somewhat excited for another tech industry that is certainly dependent on software, electronics, and new material sciences that are becoming available to redesign and rethink the way we travel through the air. But I think this is one of those industries that might drastically change the way we remember the time periods we're in. Just like how we see flip phones and we think, oh, they must be in the 90s or the early 2000s. I think one day we may look at subsonic aircraft and think, oh, they're in the 2020s. They haven't met the 2030s yet. It gets me excited. Let me know what questions and concerns you have, and in future episodes of Airplane Mode, we can dive into all the nitty-gritty details. This was just kind of a rough overview, but feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos, so thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.